Stavros, Lambrinidis, welcome to Hard Talk. The pattern of the recent past seems to have been gloom and then panic, and then the outside world rushes in with a huge amount of money. You pronounce that you're going to change your ways in Greece, and then we tip back into the mire. What's different this time around?
The difference this time around is that the decisions made in Europe are far-reaching and long-term. In other words, we have finally the bottom at a bottomless barrel. And that bottom is hugely important, both for economic reasons and for psychological reasons, because economies, of course, are psychologies. Up to now, people in Greece felt that they were making huge sacrifices, and they are, but without a light at the end of the tunnel. And people in Europe felt that they were throwing water in that barrel without seeing any results. The reason for that was not that Greece was not doing what it was supposed to do. It was, in my view at least, mostly because this debt problem was not simply a Greek one. In fact, it revealed itself as a European one. And therefore, it needed a European solution to be able to stabilize things. I believe that we have this stability now, the breathing space, both for Greece to implement extremely tough measures that it has agreed to and that it will, and for Europe to be able to monitor this process without a gun in their heads from the markets or from skeptical publics or from anyone else.
Do you think that what you have done is, in effect, a type of default?
No, I think that we're very close to default back in 2010. There's no question about this. We had the most explosive combination of debt and deficit of any other European country, and we also had a major credibility deficit. People, our partners in Europe, simply did not believe us, did not believe our numbers, did not believe we could do it. So we had to, at that time, back in 2010, with the initial loan, and with the very tough measures we took then, we had to ensure that default wouldn't happen. And we achieved that, I believe. But the fact is that in order to get out of this black hole, you need to do much more than a stopgap. And that requires growth, requires major structural changes, all those things that take time. The markets don't give you the time. So there was the impression during this past year of these major reforms that nothing was working. But I would agree that it is a very difficult situation for the Greek debt. In other words, that we are not safe, let me put it this way. We have a tremendous amount of work to do in order to ensure that those doubts about our ability to get back on track and about Europe's ability to get on track can be cast away.
Let me ask you about the extra money that you've been loaned. Barclays Capital reckon that over the next 10 years, your debt burden is going to be about 150% of GDP. So you're back more or less to where you were before the first bailout. How do you think you are going to be able to grow your way out of trouble with 150% debt burden?
It's an excellent question. Everyone knew when we got into this program back in 2010 that by definition the economy would contract at the beginning. Now what that means in very simple terms is if your GDP gets smaller, then your debt compared to the GDP gets higher. This is not a new thing or an unexpected thing. In fact, the markets and everyone else was demanding that we take these tough measures, knowing that initially you go up before you go down. What we have to do is, and what we are doing is, to ensure that this goes down for good, is to create primary surpluses in the economy. So forget the debt for a second, look at the deficit. To the extent that you have deficits, that debt will keep going up by definition. So what we plan to do is in the next 2 years turn the deficit into a surplus.
But no one believes that that's going to happen. I mean, you're in your 4th year of contraction, you're planning to slash the economy by a third.
It may feel like 4
slash
years.
The public sector
It may feel like
by a
4
third.
years of contraction, but it's not. It's only a year and a half of the actual program being applied.
Sure, but in terms of Greece being in recession, it's been 4 years.
Yes, that is true. In fact, way before the program came in, we had began, but then many European countries had began at the time to experience the difficulties of the financial crises. Look, we'd reduced the deficit by 5 percentage points. 5. It was 15 point something. in only 1 year, in 2010. No other European country ever in history has reduced the deficit in 1 year that much. I'm saying this in order to indicate the following. I can't do anything in this interview other than to try to stick by my record, such as it is, try to explain what it is, and try to convince people that we are not a government with no political will, and we're not a people incapable of taking the sacrifice. We are not even close to where we need to be, but we have exhibited the will and the capacity to make the tough changes.
You say you've exhibited the will. A lot of people within Greece and outside Greece say that is precisely Greece's historical problem, is that there has been no will. Cultural revolutions have been promised about the way in which you manage your economy, you collect taxes. It simply hasn't happened. Why should we believe you this time?
Well, because, like I said, in the past year there has been indeed a cultural revolution in Greece as well. The people back in 2009, when the government changed, before the programs and before the austerity measures and before the loans, said enough is enough. We do not want a country that is inefficient. We do not want a country where people actually work hard, because we do, but they don't produce enough. We want to get rid of the bureaucracy. We want to bring meritocracy in the system. We want to open up closed professions and allow for fresh air to breathe in and for young people to have opportunities and not to depend on who they know in government and what have you. These measures have already been applied in a remarkable way.
Have you started collecting taxes?
Yes, absolutely. You know what is very interesting? Although in a recession last year, we increased the revenues of the government compared to the GDP more than any other country in the EU. And that is because we applied taxes in a much tougher way. However, we do have tax evasion in Greece. It is a major, major problem.
Well, let me take one specific example.
And we want to change it.
Let me take one specific example of tax evasion. It's widely believed that all 300 members of the Greek parliament have declared the real value of their houses to be much lower than the sort of computer-generated official value. In other words, that they are, in effect, lying to evade taxes. The reason I pick on the MPs is I just think that if you want to set an example, why not start at the top?
Oh, we are starting at the top. There's a new tax law in place and another one coming in a few months that is now taxing property. So in other words, you look at what each person has. Do you have a boat? Do you have a swimming pool? Do you have a big house? Not at what they declare. And you tax them accordingly. You need to be very inventive in changing the tax system and culture in Greece. But changing the culture is the important thing. In my view, what you have now, little by little, is a small revolution there as well. People do recognize, because crises sometimes tend to bring those kinds of recognitions to the surface, that paying my dues to the government, as long as I trust that the government will not throw the money away, is the best way to ensure that both myself and my family and my children will have a better future. This takes time, but I assure you we're on the right path. And we're going to have a tax system, mind you, that not only will be much fairer, so the rich pay much more and the poor much less, but it will also allow for investments to come to Greece.
Let me ask you about the role of Europe and outside agencies. Do you think that your case is exceptional and unique, as the last EU communique on the emergency bailout argued? Or do you think that there is a wider problem across Europe which also needs to be addressed?
Well, I think Europe thinks it's a wider problem, which is why it set up these financial mechanisms, the EFSF and the ESM, and these are all Brussels words that people use in Brussels to confuse people and make them think they know something more than they do. Since we got into the mechanism, Portugal got in, Ireland got in. Now one sees Italy, which has 25% of the debt of the whole of Europe, Spain, but also is in the G8, Italy, by the by. We're talking about a huge economy and a healthy one. Spain being attacked. So Europe realizes that scapegoating Greece is not the answer to the problem. We have some structural issues to deal with in Europe as well, and we're dealing with them. And in the last summit, I think, very effectively. But yes, Greece did have an explosive combination of debt and deficit that exceeded any other countries. In that sense, it was unique. And cutting down on that and coming to primary surpluses requires, on the part of the Greek people, a particularly high level of sacrifice, which is not easy, but it is happening. What I always say is, you know, we went through a phase where we had a punishment rhetoric. We said, well, look at the Greeks, all the terrible things they did. And I say, yes, okay, sure, fine, absolutely. In order for that to change, there's got to be major sacrifice. There's got to be, if you like, punishment, fine. But the Greek people are being punished in that sense. Now, can we move away from the rhetoric of punishment to a rhetoric of solidarity? It would be much better for everyone, both for us receiving those loans, because you said correctly, they're loans. We are repaying every euro of them, and we will to the last euro.
But solidarity also means punishment for the rest of Europe, if you will. And I just wonder, why should, for example, the Germans stump up for your tremendous profligacy and inefficiency?
Well, I take challenge with the tremendous, but if you focus on it in terms of why should anyone else suffer for Greece's sins, quote unquote, I would answer to you as follows. First of all, it's not a suffering, it's loans, and loans at pretty hefty interest rates. So the people of Europe who are, and we are grateful for this, by the way, and seriously and honestly grateful, not just saying this to say it, who are loaning this money are not losing it. So, you know, then these are not handouts. Secondly, I would say, the reason that everyone has to participate in this, and participates in this at least at the level of discussing it and taking measures, is because the crises in Portugal and Ireland and Italy and Spain prove that this is not simply a Greek issue. We are a monetary union without an economic arm. This is crazy. I mean, if
you think there needs now to be greater fiscal union?
Absolutely, not just me. The EU does. We have an economic governance package that is coming through that makes us, for the first time, try to coordinate our fiscal policies together.
Isn't there a danger that if you decide at some sort of supranational level that you're going to impose economic union on your countries, that actually there's going to be an even greater disjunction between the rulers and the ruled?
There's always a danger like this every time you make major structural changes. The question is, how can you make them in a way that you avoid the dangers and simply reap the benefits? Which is why I said at the beginning that I think that a fiscal union that tries to emulate one model upon everyone will not work. A fiscal model, an economic governance model that puts some rules for everyone in terms of debts, deficits, and all that, but also invests in the competitive advantages of growth in each country would be remarkably good. I wish for my country, by the way, that I had tighter supervision, tighter economic governance 3-4 years ago, because the finances would not have rolled down to the position that they did had there been more European supervision. So, and it's not just me, I think the Greek people would wish to have that kind of supervision, if you like.
It's not just 3 or 4 years ago, though, is it? I mean, the whole accepted version of events now is that essentially you went into the euro on a lie. You were not meeting the so-called Maastricht criteria. It was PASOK, your party, that took Greece into the euro. Do you now accept that you took Greece in on a lie?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not.
Well, there's every single outside economist thinks that you did.
Well, every single outside fact from Eurostat and the European Commission indicates that we did not.
Well, they were getting their figures from you.
No, that's not true. When they were checking to see the figures for a country coming in, they were looking at the figures. They were focusing on them. The problem was, after that, what happened in the 2000s, not just for Greece, but for many other countries. You will remember that Germany and France were the first two countries to overstep the 3% boundary set by the Maastricht Treaty for deficits, and then there was not really a tough decision taken at the time. The Commission allowed the thing to sort of go on in the Council. So, but no, at the time, every single figure indicates we got in, like any other country who got in, meeting the criteria, or meeting them sufficiently, if you like.
The truth is, though, that whether you got in on what you believe to be accurate figures or not, you then went on this massive splurge in terms of, suddenly you were allowed to have low interest rates, low inflation. You went on this huge public spending binge. That was on PASOK's watch, as well as the subsequent government. So you do have to take some responsibility for this.
I take I'll take any responsibility you want me to take. I don't think that this is the debate that I wish to have now.
Well, but it's key, though, because people want to know whether Greece is willing to confront reality.
Well, let me answer it then. If you want to answer it, I'll answer it this way. In the past 5 years, not 10, when PASOK was in government, the debt of Greece doubled from about 140 billion to about 300 billion. That was under the previous government. I feel that what is important to emphasize now in Greece and in Europe is not a blame game of whose fault it was, but instead, what do we need to do in order to hold hands instead of pointing fingers? I make every effort back in my country, as well as my international meetings and contacts, to communicate to people that the Greek people, and even Greek parties, political parties, are in agreement on some major changes. The privatizations that are coming up, very painful but very necessary, have had the positive vote of both the PASOK government and the Conservative opposition.
Can you name a single country in history that has been able to escape both a competitiveness problem and a debt problem by not devaluing?
I don't know how many countries who have devalued and escaped that had any characteristics that are even close to comparable to Greece.
Let me give you one. Argentina, back in the 90s.
Not even close to Greece in terms of its...
Indeed,
not
even close in terms of it actually being probably in a better situation. Let me give you a quote from Simon Johnson, former chief economist of the IMF. He said that the main difference is that between Greece and Argentina is that Greece is far more indebted, much less competitive in global markets, and needs a commensurately greater fiscal and wage adjustment. In short, Greece is in much worse shape than Argentina. Argentina, of course, had to take another eye-wateringly tight austerity package, like you are doing, but then it was also able to devalue its currency. You're not.
That's right. But we have something that Argentina did not. We have, through the European, because we belong to the same union, the Euro Union, we have, through the last European decisions, up to 2020, our debts absolutely guaranteed, which means that we have, as opposed to Argentina, a very long period of time, relatively long period of time, to make the necessary changes we need to make without the Damocles sword over our heads of default. The responsibility, therefore, now is ours. Can we make the changes? It was your initial question, and I think it's a very, very fair one. My answer to that is, we have proven that we can. We just passed a new package of extremely tough measures that people, of course, are not out in the streets, celebrating about, and we are implementing them with the support of our allies. If we succeed, and we will, it's not just going to be good for the whole of the Eurozone, but it's going to be very good for any country who is not in the Euro, which trades mostly with the Euro. So I feel that what we're doing now is, if you like, not simply for us and for our sake, it is for the sake of Germany, the UK, Italy, everyone else, and I think we will succeed.
If we succeed.
Well,
the markets are still very, very dubious, which is why you've got such a lousy credit rating. You've got outside bodies such as the London-based Centre for Economics and Business Research, which says that the Eurozone is almost certain to break up in 5 years.
Yeah.
Probably by 2013, it's simply a busted flush.
Yeah.
Is there not a small part of you, of course you're going to talk up the chances of this, is there not a small part of you that thinks that actually it could yet end up with a breakup of the euro?
No, not even...
Not a small part of it?
You know, I wish I could say yes, because I think that's the answer you want, but the answer is no. There's not even the smallest part of me that has that fear or that doubt. I've been living in a world in which for the past year and a half, every day I read newspapers that predict the gloom and doom for my country and for the Eurozone. I look at a euro that, even in its worst possible crisis in history, is an extremely strong currency that has lost maybe 10 cents in the past year or 15, then regained them, and that was considered to be a big crisis compared to the dollar. I look at a euro that hasn't suffered almost at all, even though we're in the crisis. I look at a country like Greece, which, in spite of those explosive numbers that you've read, has not collapsed, although everyone is predicting every day that it will. Look, what I'm asking for is the following. I do not want anyone to give me a blind check, and I do not want anyone to take me at face value in what I say. Watch me closely, judge me. However, give me the chance to prove, because these changes do take some time, to prove that I can do what I say. If the moment that a decision is taken, or the moment I take a measure, I have the gloomers and doomers jumping up and predicting I will fail, the only thing that can be created is the danger of a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Which is precisely what's happening on the streets of Greece at the moment. Take this quote from Ilias Iliopoulos, the head of the Public Sector Union. This country will explode if they continue with this policy, including all these measures against the people. There will be public resistance, a reaction with an uncontrollable outcome. It's all very well for you to say that you are committed. There is huge anger on the streets of Greece and a wide scepticism, if not outright disbelief, outside that you really have the will to push this through.
I tried. It's impossible to do so in 30 minutes. I've tried to prove with facts that we do have the will and we have applied changes and we will apply more. Anyone who thinks that these extremely tough measures don't hurt the Greek people is out of their minds. Of course they're painful. Of course the people are not happy. However, and this is a very important however, if you look at the changes Greece is making in only 1 year, a year and a half, you will find no other country in the history of Europe, I would venture to say of the world, but let me not jump that much, that has applied such austerity with an ability to do it with complaints, with people in the streets, but in a sense with a vast majority of people saying, you know what, we probably need a lot of those changes. There are unfairnesses in these measures, there's no question. We have committed ourselves to change them the moment that we are back at a fiscal path that is sustainable. I do not want to predict what people will do or say. I can tell you for a fact that you could have probably expected much worse reactions by the people than what you're seeing today. I can tell you for a fact that there's greater consensus on some of these changes than a TV shot of an angry person in the middle of a protest would indicate. And I can tell you for a fact that we will not back off from our commitments. We are receiving loans for our partners, unprecedented, as you said, in history. We are grateful for those loans. We will make the changes necessary to make our economy competitive. We will defend the euro and our partners. We will defend the whole of Europe. And I hope that if we meet again in a year from now, I can look at you in the eye and proudly say, remember what we were talking about? I hope that you agree that we did okay.
Stavros Lambrinidis, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.